Welcome to Stay Home, Stay Focused. I'm Jack Moline. I'm president of Interfaith Alliance, and my special guest today is my friend and board member of Interfaith Alliance, Julie Baugh, who is talking to us from Dallas. Is that right? Are you in Dallas proper?
That's correct. No, I'm actually in South Lake and West Lake, which is a little bit closer to Fort Worth than it is to Dallas, but we claim it all.
Good. Well, from the great state of Texas. And
Absolutely.
Julie, before we get into anything else, I want to ask you what I ask each of my guests at the beginning. How are you doing?
Doing well. I think just probably like everybody else, there are good days and bad days. And when we do have the bad days, I try to remind myself, of all the things to be grateful for and the extra time with my kids. And I try to go outside a lot and get the kids outside a lot so we can just take a couple of deep breaths and move away from each other a little bit.
Do you have a yard you can do that in?
We do,
That's
yes,
great.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
So we're hanging in there.
and when you're not focused on taking care of your kids and washing your hands and all of that, what are you doing to keep yourself focused?
You know, I have I was every morning getting up and meditating and doing some readings, and I've really been trying to stick with that even more, no pun intended, religiously. Um, but and that helps to kind of start the day with deep breathing and positive thoughts, and then we've just been trying to look around us and look outside of us and see who we can help, how we can help in little ways or larger ways, or um, trying to keep the focus out as much as possible, because I
Right.
think it's easy for all of us when you're quarantined to just um, get stuck in
Right.
the day, what's going on in your world that day. So a lot of those kinds of things.
And looking outward is a good way to deal with that a little bit.
Absolutely. I have a senior and a sophomore and a first grader, and my senior and my sophomore have been homeschooling themselves very well independently. And then with my first grader, I'm working with her every day for a couple of hours. We're doing her schooling, and I'm learning a lot. But every time I get a little too stressed about it or stressed, I try to remember my wonderful neighbor Christina behind me, who has a first grader, a kindergartner, and a preschooler. And so, it could always be more.
There you go. I remember when my kids would ask me, to help them deeply with their homework when they were in third grade,
Right.
fifth grade, eighth grade, and I would always say the same thing to them. I've done eighth grade already. This is your turn.
Right.
We don't have that luxury anymore.
Right. Yes, true.
Julie, our viewers and listeners don't know, but we met each other because of the philanthropic work that the foundation that your family founded has done that has benefited, among others, Interfaith Alliance. It's called the Eula and John Baugh Foundation, and you are a granddaughter of Eula and John Baugh. I'm wondering, since this is not a familiar name to most Americans, can you tell us who your grandparents were?
We call them Mama and Papa, Eula May and John, but I probably slip and say Mama and Papa. Um, they were authentic, humble, loving, kind people. Born in 1916 and 1918, and married young, and they made 70 years before they passed. They both passed
Wow.
in 2007. They made a 70-year anniversary. Um, and they were always involved in their communities and with their families. And my grandfather actually tried to start several different businesses that failed originally. One of them was building doll houses. He was going to build, yeah. So, but during the Depression, he hitchhiked from Waco to Houston and got a job at the A&P grocery store. in which he was thrilled to even have a job, and kind of, worked his way up in A&P, and during World War II, noticed that now that more women were, out in the workforce and whatever, he felt like we were never going to return to home cooking as much as we had. Although now we have, this past couple of months we
No
have.
kidding.
But oh my Lord. But yeah, so he noticed that probably the restaurant industry was going to start growing even more. And so that's when he started. He and my grandmother both actually together, they founded Zero Foods, which was their original company in Houston. And she was as much of a part of it as he was. Neither one of them finished college. They both wanted to, and because of the Depression and just the way their lives went, they never finished. But she was a math major and very much an introvert, and loved doing the back office. She did all the books and all that stuff. And he's an extrovert, and he was out doing the sales. And together they built that company, and then worked with other families to found Cisco and Cisco Frozen Foods. And so I think Cisco went public in 1970, if I remember correctly. And yeah, from there they just, not only was the business successful, but they made amazing lifelong friends that were the other, some other founders of Cisco, and just people working with them. And they were very, talk about focused on the other. Oh my goodness. They always wanted to help others. And
So we'll get into that a little bit. I want to make sure that people know that when we talk about Cisco, we're talking about Cisco SYSCO, especially since we're on a Zoom platform and not on a CISCO platform.
right. Which is also done really, really well.
Yeah, no kidding, no kidding. How did the foundation come to be?
My grandparents saw a lot of people who their success and wealth that came with it really ruined their lives and ruined their kids and their families. And they talked to us about that all the time, and they were very concerned that that their success be used to help people and not just to buy stuff. So they decided to start the foundation. And originally it didn't have much in it. So they started the foundation in 1995. And like I said, originally it didn't have much in it. And then as they passed, the vast majority of their estate went into the foundation in two different chunks. And so, but the wonderful thing is that we were able to work in the foundation from 1995 to 2007 with both of them. So to really understand the causes that they cared about, and not just those specific causes, but the ideas that they cared about. So that as new organizations appeared that fit within the parameter of what they were concerned with, we were able to bring on new causes like Interfaith Alliance, which has been fantastic. That was really they were concerned with helping people and not just accumulating things and imploding the family.
It's terrific. I know that one of the major beneficiaries of the philanthropy is Baylor University. What's the connection your folks had to Baylor, or your grandparents?
They both really wanted to go to Baylor because they were both raised Baptist, and back then Southern Baptist was pretty much the only Baptist around down in Texas. And my grandfather actually went to Baylor, I believe, for a few days before he had to pull out due to the Depression and hitchhike to Houston. And my grandmother never attended Baylor. They actually met in night school at, I think it was University of Houston. In night schools where they met. But so they tried to go to Baylor. Oh, I'm sorry. I need to back up. My grandmother's father went to Baylor, Dr. Ralph Tharp. He was a pastor, and he went to Baylor. And then my grandmother did not get to go. Grandfather went for a few days. My mother went for 2 years, I believe, until she met my father and moved to Moline. And then Jackie and I both went. All of Jackie's kids have gone, and I have a senior who's going to Texas A&M.
Goodness.
He's
Rebellion.
exactly. Yeah, so 5 generations that somewhat, if not all, attended Baylor, and then we're off.
Great.
But my grandfather was also a regent at Baylor and was very concerned in the 80s when fundamentalists were taking over a lot of Southern Baptist institutions, and he was very concerned and very involved with trying to protect Baylor from being taken over.
I know from talking to my friends and colleagues in Texas in particular that the Baugh family's commitment to religious pluralism and the First Amendment is unparalleled among people, and really gave hope to lots of folks when this shift to the right that you're talking about began to have an impact on Baptist congregations in the South. So it's quite a legacy. I don't know if I ever told you this, but when I turned 60, which was almost 8 years ago, my family helped me fulfill a lifelong dream, which was to have a philanthropic fund that I could distribute. And they created something called the 60 Fund for me because I was turning 60. And I look for stories of people who have exhibited wisdom, courage, generosity, or compassion. And out of this very small amount of money I have, I send them a citation, a letter of appreciation, and a very small check. The check is normal size, but the amount on the check is very small. And I have to say, nothing makes me happier than sending out one of these letters. And I imagine you find the same kind of satisfaction. The scale is irrelevant on being able to support and endorse the values you hold. As a board member of the Baugh Foundation, how do you decide where you're going to send your largesse?
You know, it's really a difficult decision because when you start looking, when you're really out there looking, there are so many good people in the world,
Mm-hmm.
and so many people really trying to do good. Really a lot of organizations that are trying, to fight for social justice, to fight for inclusion, to fight for religious freedom. Um, you know, so several of the organizations to which we give, we were already giving with my grandparents. So we
Right.
have maintained relationships with them. And then as we come across new organizations, it's just a matter of researching and then sometimes getting involved, like I'm doing with Interfaith Alliance,
Mm-hmm.
really getting to know the people and what they're all about. It's a challenge every year because we do have limited funds. So we do have to, there are some organizations we would love to give to that we just can't yet, hopefully. But yeah, we look at all kinds of criteria. We look at who's involved. We look at what the mission is. Obviously, we look at does it fit within our parameters? Because originally the foundation was founded solely to support progressive Baptist causes, and then it kind of evolved to more social justice and inclusivity and basic human needs and helping immigrants and that kind of thing. So we look at how much support an organization is already receiving. We look at special projects that people are doing. It's really a gamut of things.
It really is a reflection that when you begin from a point of view of the genuine mission of a faith tradition, it's hard to avoid expanding it to be more inclusive. And if anything, you guys have really illustrated that by moving from progressive Baptists to a more interfaith and societally universal approach, without losing your grounding in faith, which is just wonderful. How do you feel when you write a check? I mean, you don't write it personally, I know, but how do you feel when that check goes out?
There's a lot of joy in it, as you described with when you get to send yours. It's just, um, it's almost an indescribable joy of it's bigger. It's bigger than you. It's bigger than
Yep.
that. You know.
Yeah, and I think people need to understand that it doesn't matter whether they're sending $18 like I send or a much larger check like you have the privilege to send. That feeling that you're able to help somebody else by sharing what's yours is really almost beyond description.
Well, Mama and Papa made it very clear to us it's not ours.
There you go. There you go. So, unexpectedly, because of this virus, the foundation's generosity means the survival, the survival of the organizations you support, thanks to being beneficiaries of your generosity. What does the economic downturn mean to the foundation?
That has really been interesting, because the way a foundation works, you are supposed to give away basically 5% of your assets each year, but that's a moving target.
Right.
So we met in January. We usually have our biggest meeting in January. We meet quarterly, but our biggest meeting is in January, and we usually decide at that point the vast majority of the grants. So in January, the market was doing really well. So we made our grants based on our assets in January. So as everyone knows, the market's been all over the place, and luckily it's not as bad as it was, but we're having to kind of stair step who we're sending the checks out to, just based on need, like you were saying, survival of
Sure.
organizations. And some we've had to just do a portion at this point, and hopefully we will be able to do the rest later during the year or during the summer or that kind of thing. We are committed to fulfilling the grants that we have made.
Yeah,
We
and
have to do
I
it.
know how hard that is when you make someone a promise and you desperately want to keep it, and you just circumstances sometimes get in the way. So my heart goes out to you, and some people may find that difficult to understand because here you and I are sitting here and talking about the two things that we never talk about in polite company in this country: religion and money. Right?
Which they're quite tied together.
Yeah, they certainly are. You are
About power.
you're both very much at ease with your own circumstances and entirely down to earth as a human being, completely unpretentious. How did you get to this place of ease? Can you talk about? I know it's a sort of a peculiar subject. Can you talk about your relationship with money? Because people who are listening probably struggle with this themselves.
Gosh, my relationship with money. Growing up, we really didn't have any. My In the '60s, my grandparents were, working on their company, and my mom was a single mom and working a full-time job. Plus, she sang at night with a band. To get. We didn't grow up in an affluent. We certainly weren't. Um, Gosh, I don't really know. Talk about things you normally don't talk about.
Well,
Uh,
actually,
we did not
that's
have
great. I mean, you sound like you're describing a middle class existence,
totally,
and
absolutely.
and then with the values that you've already described, your grandparents emphasizing, you just moved very comfortably into living the same kind of life with just more resources.
My grandparents really, because my mom was a single mom, my grandparents helped raise Jackie and me, and they talked frequently about the dangers of money, about that, you could do so much good with it, and you could also, like I talked about earlier, you could destroy
Hmm.
yourself, you could destroy your family, you could destroy other people, you can destroy organizations. They were very adamant about talking to us frequently, that that's not the focus, and that then it also is potentially dangerous.
It's
Um,
it's so important to keep that in focus. And though you've been blessed to have resources you probably couldn't have imagined when you were young, the fact of the matter is that what transferred from your youth seems to be not a celebration that you suddenly have resources, but a celebration that you always had the resources you needed to live this successful and compassionate life. So it's great. And you mentioned your mom, Julie. I want to ask before we go because I know she's been facing some health issues. How is she doing?
she is doing all right. She has good days and bad days, and we're just trying to be with her as much as we can. My wonderful sister lives maybe 10-minute drive from my mom, so they're in San Antonio, and I'm up in the DFW area, and my sweet sister has been over there a lot, and my kids and I try to get down there when we can, and otherwise I FaceTime with her a couple of times a day.
Good.
Um, yeah, so she's good days and bad days.
Well, please make sure she knows that we had this conversation, and that all of our viewers and listeners join with you in wishing her the best. It's not COVID-19. I just want to make sure
No,
that people know
she has
that.
Parkinson's for
Yeah.
over for 16, 17 years. So yeah, thank
Julie,
you.
thank you so much for spending this time with us. I know that you don't consider yourself a public-facing representative of the foundation, and so I had to talk you into this a little bit. But it was just wonderful to have you with us today. And for those of you who are watching this and listening to it, stay home and stay focused.
Thank you.